So I got a ton of comments on my Misfits Boxing 005 card breakdown. I read them all and I appreciate the discourse surrounding the card. After thinking about Misfits 5 since the full card was announced, I've changed my mind and softened up on a couple of fights. Starting off with the tag team fight, while I'm excited to see Pineda and BDave back in action, this fight has the potential to be a disaster. I really hope nobody gets too hurt and the fight is run safely. If the tag team match doesn't work out or isn't as entertaining as Misfits anticipated, they don't have to run any tag team boxing fights again. We're still in very early days of Misfits, so change is bound to happen. However, this tag team match could be very entertaining. It's really just a wait and see kind of deal. With that in mind, I would definitely be tuning in for the craziness. Waleed Sharks vs NNA Productions and Dean the Great vs Pali Arif were the two fights I had the biggest complaints with. I said in my original breakdown video that Waleed Sharks and Dean the Great should have had their rematch on this card, instead of fighting these Misfits first timers. I have changed my mind on this, to be honest. They need to build up to the rematch more, so having these two on the same card fighting other people is one way to do it. Fans will no doubt compare the performances of Waleed and Dean on this card, and the discussion surrounding a rematch builds more and more. After thinking more about it, it's a tad early for Misfits to have the Dean vs Waleed rematch, and the lightweight division is extremely shallow at the moment, so they also need to grow the stable of fighters with NNA and Pali. It's not like Pali and NNA haven't had fights either. They have been in scraps before on these smaller promotions, so I hope that they have continued training and they bring the fight to Dean and Waleed. King Kenny is going up against Ashley Raksu on Misfits 5, and to be honest, I think the matchmaking is still off here. While both of these guys have had fights, King Kenny has a 3-1 record while Ashley only has a loss in his boxing career. I feel like this is a massive misstep and this is just going to be another easy win for King Kenny to build him up for the big fights. I get that this needs to be done in order to get King Kenny over, but still it doesn't make for a compelling or competitive matchup. I recently compared these non-pay-per-view Misfits cards to the UFC Fight Nights, where the main goal is to introduce new fighters and bring up prospects. Now there are some UFC Fight Nights that are fucking snooze fests, like the one we had just last week with Derek Lewis and a bunch of relatively unknown fighters. UFC has a fight card every other week it seems, so they can kind of afford to have rather lackluster cards sometimes. Misfits on the other hand is every couple of months, so even though they still need to build new boxes up, they need to also have good matchups. That's not to say that Misfits don't have a great business model, because I actually think it's quite solid. These non-pay-per-view cards are basically free if you have DAZN, and it gives them a chance to introduce newcomers or further established prospects. Then when it's time for the big Misfits events, you have a bigger roster of fighters to look forward to seeing. Having a couple of free cards, then a mega card that you have to pay for is awesome, and I'm glad that Misfits went down this road. Misfits have been very consistent so far, but their events are not too oversaturated like the UFC. People have argued that Misfits 5 is great because we have Waleed, Dean, King Kenny, and Jay Swingler on it. But my original video wasn't necessarily about the number of popular names on the card, but the quality of their opponents. Again, we're like 6 months into the promotion and the long-term vision is extremely ambitious, so I do need to cut them a lot of slack here. Some cards will just be less interesting than others for the time being, and I'm glad that we're getting quite a few new faces. I hope Godson and Tempo Arts really make a name for themselves on Misfits, for example, during the press conferences and inside the ring. With Misfits going all the way around the world in the next year or so, it'll be a great opportunity to see some influences from other countries besides America and the UK. As for the main event, it appears that Nick has been working hard in the gym and at least taking preparation more seriously than Churdley's. So with that in mind, I hope we do get a good fight out of them both, and it's not just another first round knockout for Jay. To conclude, I understand that Misfits 5 is free on DAZN and how necessary these kinds of intermediate cards are. I have softened up on the fights with Waleed and Dean, and I hope that the newcomers can put on a good show. What do you think about Misfits 5? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.